Hi, I'm Red Raven, and I am new to the whole YouTube thing. What I'm gonna do is post a lot of Reddit posts, pretty much anything that you guys and I seem interested in, and see what goes from there. I do cosplaying, drawing, sculpting, writing, graphic design. Alright y'all, we're doing some posts from r/ProRevenge. This one was posted by 360 Entertainment. This is not your car, lady. So this happened around 2008. My buddy Brock had gotten out of the military after 10 years. He started in the Marines but transitioned into the Army for the last 4 years before buying a house in Texas. When he got out, he did a variety of jobs before landing a gig with a repo service. He worked there for a year and had a lot of wild stories, but this one sticks out the most as he helped a fellow soldier get revenge on an evil ex. Brock was at the office speaking with his manager, whom I'll refer to as Karen. Now this particular Karen had a lot of Karen-like qualities, but was a force of good if you can believe that. While they were talking, they see a young man enter the office. They immediately notice he had 2 black eyes and an arm was in a sling. This young man, whose name I unfortunately never learned, but I'll call Ben, asked how hard it would be for them to help repossess his car. Karen called his daughter in, Karen Jr., and had her pour Ben a cup of coffee. Karen then asked Ben to tell her story. Ben began with telling her that he had just returned from deployment. He had been dating a local girl that lived outside of the famous Fort Hood. Not a good idea, by the way. Before deployment, thanks to a previous deployment, he had managed to get himself a used black Dodge Charger, which was his baby. He further explained that shortly after buying the car, he had met the local girl, who for the sake of the story I'll call Morgan. Morgan was always asking to drive his car, but he would always decline. When he was getting ready for his deployment, Morgan repeatedly asked if she could borrow the car, but he kept saying no. After much needling, he relented, but on the condition that she takes care of his apartment until he comes back from the rest and relaxation leave. She agreed. Ben left for his deployment while Morgan took care of his place. When Ben came back for leave, he found his apartment immaculate. He pulled his car from storage, drove to Morgan's, and he spent a few days with her before handing her the keys and heading to his home state to visit family before returning to his deployment. He returned again from his deployment and found nothing but trouble. When he walked into his apartment, he found a layer of dust on just about every surface. It was almost like no one had been there in months. When he checked his bedroom, he found his room had been torn apart. All of his drawers had been searched through and upturned. He tried to call Morgan but never received an answer. He located a safe, which was hidden, and found it hadn't been touched. He then grabbed his spare key from the safe, called a buddy of his, and went to Morgan. As they pulled up to Morgan's, he saw a car there that he initially didn't recognize, but as they got closer, he realized it was his baby. Morgan had the car painted hot pink and put 24-inch spinners on it. He tried the key to make sure and the lights flickered as it unlocked. While his buddy laughed, Ben went to the front door and Morgan answered. He asked what had happened to his car and she responded, "It's my car now." Ben walked away and hopped in his hot pink mess. As he started it, 4 large dudes came out of Morgan's house, one with a baseball bat, and yanked Ben out of the car. They proceeded to beat the crap out of him in the driveway before his friends intervened, pulling his conceal and carry pistol on the group. He then took Ben to the hospital. I'm honestly not sure if the cops were called on this. I assume yes, but even then, Ben said his friends drove by Morgan's house a handful of times while he was in the hospital at random times and the car was never there. Karen stared at Ben for a bit before asking for the paperwork then. Ben handed it to her and Karen had a smile form on her face. She then asked Ben for Morgan's phone number. Ben gave it, but wasn't aware of what was about to happen. Karen handed the phone to Karen Jr., who then dialed the number. Karen Jr. then began speaking to Morgan, telling her that they'd meet at one of the local clubs and wanted to know if she was down to party that night. Apparently, Morgan agreed and the plan was set. Brock parked his tow truck at the club and waited. Sure enough, Morgan showed up with the pink monster and parked it. Went inside with some girlfriends. Brock gave them 5 minutes before he stealthily drove up to the car and hooked it up. As he was pulling out with the pink monster, Morgan walked out of the club. She saw her car in the tow truck and began trying to flag Brock down, but he was already out of there. The next day, it was business as usual at the office when Morgan called. She was furious that her car was stolen by them and wanted it back. Karen, using her best customer service voice, told her if she had the registration, she could come pick it up. Morgan began screaming louder than she was gonna call the cops, at which point Karen sarcastically told her, "Please do," then hung up on her. As this phone call was going on, Brock happened to look out the window and saw Morgan standing next to a car in a vacant lot, throwing what appeared to be a temper tantrum. After Karen hung up, Brock watched her get in the car on the passenger side. Karen then looked out the window and had Brock verify it was her. She then began to smirk. Karen then proceeded to call the owner of the property Morgan and her friend were occupying. She told the owner about the car and asked if he wanted it towed. The owner okayed it. Brock then drove his truck over to the ladies in the car and introduced himself. They tried to explain that they were waiting for Morgan's boyfriend, but Brock insisted they weren't allowed to park there. They argued and called him every name in the book. Brock then hooked up their car and lifted it partially off the ground, forcing the two to exit the vehicle. They tore into him until he showed them the tow order. While this back and forth was going on, Ben arrived at the office and Morgan saw him walk in. She ran into the office door and Brock proceeded to lower the car. When Brock went back to the office, all hell had broken loose. Morgan apparently tried to snag the keys back from Ben, but he pocketed them. She began to hit him in his hurt arm and warned Ben that she'd call her friends to finish the job if she didn't get her keys back. Karen Jr. had already called the cops at this point, and Brock got in between Ben and Morgan, even telling Morgan to try hitting him to find out what would happen. Morgan then tried to play the pity card and said she only wanted the keys to get her laptop for school. Karen asked Ben to hand the keys over to Brock so he could grab the laptop. Brock retrieved the laptop from the car, and as he was handing it over, she rushed to aggressively grab it and knock it from Brock's hands. Completely furious at this point, Morgan accused Brock of dropping the computer on purpose and threatened to sue. The cops then arrived and Morgan began her sob story again, telling the police that they stole her car. The police questioned Karen and Karen gave her the casual smirk while asking if they wanted to see the security videos. The police watched and listened as Morgan punched Ben several times and heard the threats she made about sending her friends after him. The police then turned to Morgan, who had turned ghost white at this point. She tried to back her way to the door, but the police stopped her. They proceeded to ask about the car, Ben's injuries, and who she had planned on sending after him. She initially denied everything, but they had evidence on her beating him up. She was arrested and Ben got his car back. After the cops left, Ben admitted he didn't want to be seen in a car that looked like it was advertising Pepto-Bismol and planned on trading it in for a GTO. We later heard through the grapevine that the 4 guys who beat up Ben were arrested. Morgan had ratted them out. Brock had a few more stories, but none of them were nearly as good as this one. I actually don't know what to say to that. That was a pretty intense story. If that was only one of the many stories this guy had, he must have been very interesting at parties. I really feel bad for this dude, honestly. If some random ass chick stole my car while I was on deployment and dyed it hot pink, oh gosh. And for you getting beat up by those 4 dudes, there's no justification for that. Alrighty, this post is by Serene Phoenix 89. Evil cheerleader gets shown what evil truly is. So, I was reminded of this when an old school buddy found me on Facebook the other day. I apologize for the length of his story. I will put TLDR at the end. Now, before I become a friendly, cookie-loving teddy bear, I was a thin, mean little theater goth who got into frequent fights. It's what happens when you're black, nerdy, and gay while growing up in rural Virginia. I especially could not stand it when people pick on my friends. It comes to an evil cheerleader. We'll call her Bae. Now, some of you might be rolling your eyes at this. Evil cheerleader? Oh no, what a terrible cliche. But our school was a little different. And you see, she was the only evil cheerleader. The rest of them were super nice and did a lot of inter-school outreach. Anyway, Bae liked to stomp through the hallways like she owned the place and would viciously bully anyone who looked at her wrong. Naturally, my confrontational ass would stare at her like she was a bug every time I saw her. Up to this point, she only had beef with me. We'd trade insults, she started a rumor about me, I'd pour soda on her hair, that sort of thing. When she saw me with one of my shy theater friends, who we'll call Kay, I was more than Bay's match, so instead she chose to go after Kay. Kay was such a wonderful human. Never said a bad word about anyone, was always willing to help people, and she made the best s'more cookies. Kay also had the unfortunate habit of just letting people treat her however they wanted and not saying anything about it. So imagine my sheer fury when I see Bay slamming Kay against the locker by her hair, calling her the N-word. You want to try to bully me? Fine. You want to call me outside my name? Fine. What you will not do is come over to my friends with racism and violence. Not today, baby girl. I immediately ran over and slapped Bay as hard as I could. Now, due to my height and ethnicity, I've been taught that I shouldn't start physical altercations with women, as it never looks good. I care just enough not to deck that leap. As Bay was picking her face off the floor, she thought it would be a good idea to double down on the racism. All you N-words are wife beaters. Come again? I slapped you because you were hurting my friend. The hell is wrong with you? She stole something from me like that dirty monkey she is. Again, what the hell is wrong with you? Her insults really weren't making sense. Looking back, I think she was trying to say the most racially offensive thing that she can think of without any real consideration of reality, which is just a terrible roasting technique. You know what? I've had less than 0 fricks to give you right now. You come near my friends again, and I will literally snatch your uterus out with my bare hand. He's a uterus snatcher. I love that. I love you. We'll see what my boyfriend says about that. Oh no, not your boyfriend. She walked away, spitting more bull honky, but at that point I chose to just ignore her and focus on Kay, who had a small knot forming on her head. I took Kay to the nurse's office and begged her to report Bay. Kay didn't want to because I might get in trouble too. I told her that I didn't care. Slapping that female dog was worth it. But Kay didn't budge. After Kay got an ice pack, we were both sent back to class, and the rest of the day went on as usual. I was on my way to anime club. Yes, I'm a weeb. And who should show up but Bay's boyfriend, who we'll call Bob. Now, Bob was a soft-spoken guy who only got cool points because he was on the football team. Peel off the football team luster and you have a walking, talking doormat who's about as intimidating as a medicated cotton ball. So him and his boys waltz on up to me, spitting some wannabe threatening line about me making me disappear. I informed him that I owned waterfront property at the Wish Islands because I wish a female dog would. His friends laughed at him, which exasperated the snot out of me. Most punks are all talk. You stand your ground and they'll back off, unless they have their friends with them. The moment they lose face in front of their crew, they become much more likely to do something stupid. So, of course, he rushes me. Now I've got something of a conundrum. I'm scrappy, but I am by no means a badass. There are 5 of them and 1 of me. So if I can drop this dude, I have to be able to either put on a good show so they don't engage or run. Considering I was extra AF, I decided to put on a show. I used Bob's momentum and I slammed him into a nearby locker, putting my forearm on his throat. Now, I don't remember what threat I whispered to Bob, but I was going to assume it was effective because he went still. Now, what I do remember was what happened next. Now, due to how I was holding him against the locker, our bodies were pretty close. Too close. Because I felt something press against my thigh. Now I'm thinking it's a weapon or a phone or something. Nope. It was his erection. Homeboy was aroused. Why? No clue. All I do is... I love this story. All I know was that things had gotten really awkward. I let him go and hightail it out of there because I'm equal parts what the fork and did that really just happen. During anime club, I told Kay all about what happened. She laughed because of course she did, but then a look crept in her eye. It was a devious little smirk that I'd never seen up till that point. She looked at me and told me that if we wanted to, we could use this to teach Bay a lesson. I'm thinking she meant like a rumor or using this to insult her, but no. Kay had something far worse in mind. It's true what they say about the quiet ones. So after a few days and some additional planning, it was time to put our revenge into motion. I found Bob and asked to speak with him privately, so we went into a spare classroom that the school never really uses. After some back and forth, Bob confirmed that he was bisexual. Some cringe-worthy flirting later, Bob and I are making out, all according to plan. Bae would walk in, see us, and be humiliated. Now, I don't want to mention that in hindsight is 2020. We were teenagers and we really didn't understand how problematic this plan was on a social scale. Bae deserved some karmic justice, but this really shouldn't have been it. That being said, Bob was an eager beaver. He didn't stop at just making out. He, went down south, if you catch my meaning. Being hormonal and admittedly starved for a little attention, really didn't see any reason to stop him. So when Kay led Bae into the room, she got to see Bob's head, well, bobbing, and me with a contented smile on my face. Now, to Bae's credit, she was not homophobic towards Bob in any way. In that highly problematic situation, she had plenty of opportunity. She was, however, furious at him for cheating on her with one of her sworn enemies, and an N-word to boot. She screamed at him for almost 15 minutes before a teacher had to come by and demanded that we head to class. Later, Bae found me at lunch and called a ceasefire of sorts. She agreed to only target me if I agreed to stay away from Bob. I agreed, knowing full well that Bob was coming over to my house that afternoon. Bae and I would continue to antagonize each other until I moved away, but it was never as severe. In some ways, I think we kind of broke her confidence a little. Oh well, don't be racist, douche canoe, and people won't want to get back at you. That was an intense story. That seems more like it'd be in a movie than an actual school event. But I congratulate you for getting the revenge you wanted. I hope you guys liked my content. If you would like to watch more, please like and subscribe. I took Kay to the nurses.